Okay, let's look at part 2 of doing a research paper. The easiest way to start getting scholarly resources is to just go directly to Bergen's homepage, and then we're going to go right here to where the library homepage is. And we will click that on. And then here you are taken to a cornucopia of resources. So here are a whole bunch of stuff that you might want to use. In particular, let's pay attention to the citation guides. We'll click that on. You're going to write your paper in MLA format, so let's go to MLA. And it gives you everything that you need to know in order to properly format your paper. And the way to do it is just to do it. Look at what a sample research paper looks like in MLA format, how to have, different citation examples here, how to do in-text parenthetical citations, what does your works cited look like. Everything is right there. When you are using a lot of these online resources, which I'm going to show you in a minute, a lot of them will automatically format it for you, your resource in MLA format, and you just have to copy and paste. So pay attention to that if that's available to you. But here's where you can get all the information for free, so go for it. Let's go back to the library homepage. Frequently used databases. These are really generalized kind of databases, and they're pretty easy to use. So we'll use Academic Search Premier to look at first. If you're accessing this from home, you will need to have your Bergen ID because you need to type your number in. But once you have that in, it's going to be no problem. So let's search for a topic we have covered, prison reform. And there's a lot of information on prison reform. And you can see that you can spend a lot of time trying to figure out exactly what you would write about for prison reform. The one article that we read in our class was about prisoners having access to Ivy League education, which, by the way, they did beat Harvard school students recently, but that's an aside. Would you argue for that? Would you argue that prisoners should have access to this type of education when, a lot of other people don't and they have to pay for it? Is this what we want to do? Is this how we reform people? How appropriate is it that a society supports that? Or can we not afford to not do that? That we need to be able to reform prisoners and have them be able to make their way in the world once they come out. There's so many different ways to look at that one aspect of prison reform. Should prisoners have access to education? There's so many other things within the topic of prison reform that you could write about, and it depends on how you want to argue your position. Of course, you don't have to do prison reform if you don't want to. But let's just take a look at Getting Smart on Crime. Let's just take a look real fast. It gives you an abstract of what the paper is about, and if you want to use it, then you would go over here and get the full text or the PDF, so you can get it in a variety of ways. Over here you can add it to your folder so it'll hold on to it for you. Print it. It's probably a very large file, so I wouldn't recommend that necessarily. Of course, you can email it to you, save, and like I said, citation. Let's take a look at that. It comes up for you in different formats. We want to use MLA. There it is, MLA. That's your works cited. So if you used this resource in your paper, you would simply just copy and paste this to put in your works cited page. And you don't have to figure out how to put it together yourself. So it's very handy that way. So going back to the library homepage, you can see that there are other databases that you can search. These are pretty general. Then you can go to databases A to Z, and these are grouped more by subject. So the name is over here and the link, and then what it's about, and then you can see what the subject is: business, general, history, etc. So what are you going to be writing about? If you're writing about prison reform, you're probably not going to be using a database that says it's about nursing, right? So obviously that's not something that you're going to be using. But this is another area for you to use and research: newspapers, libraries, etc. So there's a lot of information that you can get just directly from these databases. Now, what I did mention, and this is going to be in Moodle, is I do have topics with bibliographies, and you can find this just by searching these different databases. So they already have a bibliography for you if you are interested in doing this. A few years ago, I did a project with the Center for Peace and Justice at Bergen, and it was covering students were researching and arguing on these 3 different topics, global topics of child welfare, women's rights, and healthcare. So those were the broad overview topics, but then within it there was different resources given within these topics to help students focus what their writing is on. So if you are interested in using one of these topics, go right ahead, and you can find all of these sources right through the Bergen databases. It'll be handy for you. If you're not interested, you don't have to. You just have to come up with a different topic. Okay, so that's the general overview of what is expected for your research paper, and then also how do you find academic, scholarly information through the Bergen website. You'll be fine. It's not going to be a problem. A lot of people sometimes get intimidated by such assignments, but it really is something that is not that difficult once you start, and you'll be glad that you have put your effort into it, because the more effort and time you put into it, the better you're going to get at it. And so when you take composition 2 and you have to do another paper, you're not going to be intimidated or anything like that. Okay, so have fun with it. Hopefully that you'll find something that you're interested in writing and arguing about. Okay.